What is up, guys? We are back again with another video, and in today's video we are going to discuss how to navigate your nutrition during this Christmas period, this holiday season. Now, this is something that a lot of people struggle with, so let's get stuck into it, right? Now, the first thing that we must consider when we're talking about this is, what's the actual goal? Are you trying to lose fat? Are you trying to gain muscle? Are you just trying to be healthy? There's multiple goals here. I'm talking to multiple audiences, right? So you need to be very clear when you listen to this, where you fit in this, how this applies to what you have going on. Now, I would argue that, during this time period, it's probably best that you don't have an outcome focus to your nutrition. And what I mean by that is, we're not really chasing fat loss. We're not really chasing, the perfect end stage outcome, physique progression, muscular progression, whatever it is, the actual outcome. And instead, we're going to use this time period to really focus on, really nailing down good diet patterns, really focusing on nailing down good lifestyle patterns where possible, right? We want to think of this next, couple of weeks as the time frame in which we really build a solid foundation so that when January comes about, we can actually really start to work on our goals, right? Because everyone kind of does the opposite of that, where they spend the next couple of weeks really being lackadaisical with their diet, with their goals, with their progress, etc., and really not setting themselves up for success come January, okay? So we're going to flip that a little bit. We're going to set ourselves up for success by building some good habits first and foremost, right? So that would be my thinking, but it might not be your thinking. And either way, you need to know how to navigate this Christmas period, this holiday season, right? Now, the first thing to keep in mind is when we're looking at our nutrition, it is the average that matters most, right? You're not going to lose a load of fat with one day of dieting. You're also not going to gain a load of fat with one day off your diet, right? So we need to keep that in focus. We need to focus on the fact that it's what we do repeatedly over time that matters the most, okay? And that seems inconsequential, but it is actually really, really key to get into your mind, because it really does help you, stay the course with things. Because you very often see people, they'll go out, say they have an event on a Friday night, they have a work Christmas party, whatever it is, right? And they go a little bit wild with the alcohol and they just start again on Monday, right? That's the thought process. Oh, I'll start again on Monday, right? You're just basically writing off, half a day on Friday and then the other 2 days on the weekend, right? And that really doesn't help, because what we really want to look at is the average. Who cares if the Friday night is a bit of a wild one? You get straight back on track on Saturday and Sunday, and the average, it averages out to a better diet, rather than going off track on a Friday and then throwing away the weekend and starting again on Monday, which never happens, right? So keep in mind all these little transient events that's going to happen, a little bit of more alcohol, an evening meal over here out with friends, etc., right? It's all inconsequential if we can get the average of your diet in a good place. It's the stuff that you habitually do, your breakfasts, your lunches, your dinners on average, right? Now, aside from that, there are two major issues, or two major situations, we'll call them, that people really struggle with navigating during this Christmas period, during this holiday season, right? And the first one is the increased abundance of sweets, chocolates, that kind of stuff, enjoyable, indulgent foods around the house, around the office, and work, just in general. There seems to be more indulgent foods around, right? Now, that's the first thing. The second thing is there generally is an increase in frequency of indulgent events, right? So this could be food, it could be alcohol, it could be a combination of both. But during the kind of holiday season, a lot of people will find themselves going out more, going for food with friends, going for a few drinks with work, etc., right? So we need to have a strategy we need to have multiple strategies for both of those things, right? Now, before we truly get stuck into this, I do want to make it very clear that something that a lot of people do, it actually serves no purpose. And what I'm talking about here is all of these feelings of guilt and shame when things don't go to plan, right? And what I mean by that is, a lot of people will do stuff like they'll go out on a Friday night, they'll wake up in the morning, oh man, that was terrible, I ruined my diet, I hate myself, I'm a terrible person. And they'll basically beat themselves up for enjoying themselves the night before, right? And that really doesn't serve you well at all, because what often happens then is you feel like crap. And what happens when you feel like crap? Well, I'm gonna reach for some extra food, comfort food. I've already fucked it anyway, so I might as well, right? And that, again, it doesn't really help. It doesn't serve you. So we need to get rid of those feelings of guilt, those feelings of shame, and then we just need to get back on track as soon as possible, right? A lot of people, they're just gonna be best served during this time period, just drawing a line through the event and just getting straight back on track as if nothing ever happened, right? Just forgetting about it. It happened in the past, can't change it, cool, going forward, I'm straight back on track, right? Now that's quite hard to do in practice, but it really does help you actually get the results that you're looking for. And in this time period, again, I would argue that the results we're looking for is building a really good diet structure, right? Now, other people, you're gonna have to use that information that you learned during that event or that thing that, pulls you off track. And we're gonna use that information to build a better strategy for next time, So there's two outcomes there. Some people, again, they're just gonna be better off served. Just forget about it. Don't even think about it. Just get straight back on track, right? Other people are going to be able to think about it, analyze what happened. Oh, I went into the event a little bit hungry, and as a result, they brought out food. It was my favorite food, and I couldn't stop eating on it. Okay, so what do we do in future? Okay, well, maybe we don't go into the event hungry. Maybe we have a protein shake beforehand. Whatever, right? There's always a strategy that we can employ, learning from the event, so that going forward we can fix whatever issues arose, right? We also need to make sure that we're not viewing this as an all or nothing process, right? Because that, again, really doesn't serve you well, right? You need to look at this as if failure is part of the process, okay? You are going to fail. We all fail all the time. Even the person that you're looking at on social media that has the most perfect diet, the most perfect training program, their life seems perfect, they fail all the time, right? They're constantly in this kind of battle to get things perfect, but it's never perfect, okay? Nobody has the perfect lifestyle, nobody has the perfect diet, training, etc., right? There's always something that can be worked on, right? So we need to get rid of this all or nothing mentality, because again, it does not serve us, right? We need to look at these little speed bumps that occur as learning moments or teaching moments, right? Going forward, okay, that's what happened in the past, this is how I'm going to solve that in the future, right? And again, what we want to really do is build sustainable habits that we can see ourselves doing far into the future, because again, we're going to use this time period to set ourselves up for success next year, right? Now, let's actually get into the two situations that people find themselves really struggling with. So the first one, there's extra food around, right? And again, it could be just sweets, chocolates, etc., or it could just be the fact that there's a lot of tasty foods just in general that seem to be in the house, right? Or in the workplace, right? Now, the first key is to control what you can control, right? Just because you know that there's a box of chocolates in work, right? That doesn't mean that you should just forget good nutrition patterns for your breakfast or your lunch or your dinner, right? If you have control over those meals, right? Take control of those meals, right? You know you can eat a good breakfast, okay? So eat a good breakfast, right? Don't worry about the fact that later on in the day you're probably gonna have a few sweets, right? It's irrelevant, right? We're gonna make sure that our breakfasts are really enjoyable, really serving us, and they're dialed in because you have control over them. Now, most people, they have control, the most control at least, over their breakfast and their dinner, right? Lunch, it can be a bit variable, especially if you're in the office or whatever, and maybe you don't bring a packed lunch or you don't like to bring a packed lunch. It can be a little bit more variable, a little bit harder to stay on track with lunch, but at least breakfast and dinner, I can have dialed in, right? So that's the first thing. We're gonna control what we can control. We're not just gonna write off the whole day because we had a few sweets, right? You are in control, right? You are in control of your breakfast, your dinner, whatever meals that you can be in control of. Let's get them dialed in, okay? So that's the first thing. If you find that lunch is the thing that's really, really, pulling you off track, then start gaining some more control there. Or again, it could be breakfast, it could be dinner. Just start trying to gain a little bit more control at that meal. Okay, so again, if it's lunch, maybe we bring a packed lunch into the workplace, right? Or maybe you have some snacks available to you, so you're not, really just desiring all those chocolate bars and whatever else that are in the office, right? So we're going to try to control what we can control, and then we're going to start trying to, claw back a little bit of control in the other areas, right? Now, one of the areas within that whole overall control of the diet is the fact that a lot of people find they end up snacking on these indulgent foods in the evenings, right? They might have their dinner, they might have their lunch, they might have their breakfast, and it's all perfect, right? And then it gets to the evening time, they want to wind down, they turn on Netflix or whatever it is, and all of a sudden they've consumed an extra 1,000 calories that they didn't intend to consume, right? So evenings are a particularly hard time for a lot of people. And one of the things that you can do to overcome this is just not sitting in front of a screen being bored, right? Because that's when a lot of this stuff happens. If you can bring in some sort of habit, some sort of hobby, something that actually requires a little bit of, or rather requires you not to be bored, right? That can really help. If it's going for a walk, if it's going listening to a podcast while you go for a walk, now obviously that's not possible in every single area, but something like that. Maybe it's an evening class that you go to, maybe it's, I don't know, whatever hobbies you have, do that in the evening so that you're not just sitting there thinking about food, thinking about, oh, I have actually a load of crisps in the cupboard over there, We want to make sure that we're not just sitting there bored, right? Other people, they find a lot of benefit in setting an end to their eating window, okay? And what I mean by this is, rather than, again, just falling victim to whatever food is in the house in the evening, they say, oh, well, after 8:30, after I've had my evening meal and maybe a small snack afterwards, it's over, right? I don't eat any more for the rest of the day, right? Now, a lot of people find that really helps with their overall sleep, so that's why a lot of people do it, but it also has the positive effect of stopping people snacking at a time where a lot of snacking occurs, right? So let's just say 8:30, we're not eating after that, right? That's the end of our eating window, right? Now, obviously, if you're absolutely starving or work ran over or whatever, you can modify that, but it's one of those things where you're like, yeah, look, I just don't eat after 8:30, right? Some people, it's a little bit weird, but it does seem to work for a lot of people. They brush their teeth at that time, right? So it'll be 8:30, they've eaten their evening meal, they've maybe had their small snack or whatever, and then they brush their teeth, right? And that signals to them that, okay, well, I don't eat food after I brush my teeth, and then they just go on about their day as if like eating food now is not an option, right? So that can work for a lot of people, right? But there are some other things that we want to set up so that having extra food around the house or in the office or wherever it is, it doesn't really derail us as much. And one of those things that is actually a really major part of this, and this is one of the reasons that I argue that you shouldn't really try to be dieting for fat loss at this time, is not letting yourself get hungry, right? Because it's harder to stay on track. It's harder to say no to those really tasty foods when you're hungry, right? So don't let yourself get hungry, right? It seems pretty straightforward, but a lot of people fail at this. And they fail at this for a few different reasons. One, maybe they just have really poor dietary habits or dietary knowledge. They don't know how to set up the diet in a way that stops them from being hungry. Or two, which is usually the more prominent one, is people just try to eat very, very few calories, right? They try to diet really, really excessively low on calories to kind of force fat loss. And that doesn't really help with what we're trying to achieve here, which is navigating the overall Christmas period, right? So a few little tips here to make sure that you're not hungry throughout the day is spreading your meals throughout the day. Straightforward enough, right? So have a good breakfast, lunch, dinner, maybe organize some snacks, bring those snacks into work or wherever it is that you are, and there you go. You're not going to be as hungry. You're not going to be as likely to eat any of these indulgent snacks because you have your meals planned out for the day. You have all your meals with you, right? You have your snacks, etc. with you, right? So you're not hungry, right? Now, another thing is just not eating excessively low calories. Seems straightforward enough, but just don't be trying to eat 500 calories throughout the day, because you're not going to stick to it, especially when, Karen from the other office over there or the other room over there is like, oh, do you want these sweets or whatever? And you're gonna say yes, right? So don't be hungry, don't excessively restrict calories, and try to have a good overall diet structure in place, right? Then, and this is a really key thing, right? If you are going to indulge in these foods, whatever they are, right? Sweets, chocolates, etc., right? Actually chew those foods, actually savor those foods, actually taste those foods, because very often people will go, oh yeah, I'm a sucker for these sweets, whatever it is, this box of chocolates, etc., right? But they never actually taste it, right? They never actually enjoy it, right? It's just boom, straight into the mouth, gobble it down, and it gives this momentary sugar rush, and they're like, oh yeah, I really enjoy it. But when you actually get them to sit down, eat the food, chew it, savor it, very often people will say, it's actually not that nice. The taste, the texture, the sweetness, the sugar, it's just not enjoyable when you actually sit back and you're present with that food and you actually are present while eating that food, right? So that can be really, really helpful. So if you are planning on indulging in any of these sweets or chocolates or whatever, actually sit down and make it an indulgent event. Make it something where you're actually tasting it, you're actually chewing it. You're not just wolfing back these foods and you maybe chewed them twice. They're just barely swallowable, right? Don't do that. Actually chew the foods. Make it so that you actually taste the foods. You actually, try to savor the foods, try to get the full, experience of the foods. And then you can make a decision whether, that is something that you actually do like and you want to at least have in your diet occasionally, right? And very often people will eat these foods and they'll find that it actually made me feel sick. It made me have an upset tummy. It didn't make me feel good. It gave me some momentary pleasure while it was, in my mouth, but afterwards I just felt like crap, right? So you now know that, okay, it gives you this momentary kick of pleasure, but the ultimate amount of pleasure is actually negative, right? So you might want to rethink your overall approach to, engaging in these foods, right? Now, that's the extra food stuff. A combination or some of those tips and tricks will hopefully help you navigate that stuff, right? Now, events. This is where a lot of people, they completely shit the bed because they find it very hard to stay on track when they are out of their normal environment, right? Now, the process stays the same for this stuff, whether you are dieting, gaining, whatever. It just changes in terms of the actual specifics, which I'm not going to be able to give you right here and now. Like, for example, if we're dieting and we need to be in a certain amount of calorie deficit per week, obviously that's going to be different than if we're trying to gain weight and we need to be in a certain amount of calorie surplus for the week, right? But again, as I said earlier, I would probably argue that we should just be looking at really building some good, really dialed in, resilient processes now, right? Now, again, this approach also stays the same whether we're dealing with food or alcohol or a combination of both of them at the event, right? However, alcohol generally makes sticking to your calories much harder, right? And there's a few reasons for that. First of all, it's really not satiating. It doesn't fill you up. It doesn't make you feel like you've had food, but it still contributes calories to your diet, right? And also for a lot of people, roughly 4/5 of people, they get hangovers the next day, so roughly 1/5 of people don't get hangovers. I'm one of them. I also don't drink, so, whatever. But a lot of people don't get hangovers, but the vast majority of people do actually get hangovers. And that makes it really, really impossible or next to impossible to stay on track with your nutrition, or at least it feels like that, right? Now, again, the process will also be slightly different if you know there's an event coming up versus if you have to be more reactive to the event, right? Something was just sprung on you last minute. You're like, oh yeah, we actually have to go to dinner tonight with X, Y, and Z. Get ready, Like that's obviously going to be different in terms of how we handle that than if we know, okay, actually Friday night, I know I'm going out. What can I do earlier in the week and then maybe later in the week to account for that, right? Now, again, it depends on whether you're dieting, gaining, etc. But a lot of people find that eating slightly lower calories earlier in the week, so they have a little bit of a calorie buffer, can be quite beneficial for fitting in these events. Now, that does come along with its own problems in terms of, maybe you now have to eat in a deficit earlier in the week and you're more likely to binge at the event, or you're more likely to, eat more calories throughout the week because you're hungry. It comes along with a whole host of other issues, but it can be effective for some people and for some situations, right? So that's the first thing, potentially lower calories earlier in the week just to accommodate, more calories at the event, right? The next thing is we want to try to make better choices wherever possible when we're at these events, right? Don't go into the event with the mentality of, oh, I can't be perfect, so I might well be as bad as possible. Right, you'll see people do this all the time, especially if they've been dieting a while. They will go into the event and rather than having a normal human portion of food, a normal human meal, they'll be like, yeah, I want that meal, and then, oh, actually I want that extra stuff here, and oh, that's the highest calorie meal on this thing, I'm going to choose that, even though I never would have chosen that otherwise. They go all out, right? So we don't want to do that. We want to go in, make better choices wherever possible during that meal. It doesn't mean we have to be an absolute saint or an angel or anything, but we want to make better choices during that meal, that event, whatever. And this also applies to alcohol, right? There are better or worse choices. If you're going to be, sinking back pints or whatever that have whatever amount of calories in them versus you're going to have, some sort of spirit with, a mixer, like obviously there's a different amount of calories in those, right? Now, obviously this is dependent on, what the event is. I hardly expect you to be, knocking back shots of vodka when everyone else is just having a nice, quiet, easy one, a few pints, like, again, you have to read the room, you have to make better choices that are, that actually make sense for that event. But either way, we can still make better choices in certain circumstances, right? Now, one of the things that you want to really, really pay attention to is, or really try to squash, is having this, I'll start again on Monday, right? Or I'll start in the future, in the script, whenever in the future time period, right? That doesn't serve you. It's not a helpful mindset. It's not a helpful mentality. And a lot of people fall victim to that and end up, pushing out their goals or their progress for years because of that mentality. It's basically a mind virus, right? And I know a lot of people listening to this, they'll be in the mentality of like, oh, well, there's a reason why me personally, I should be starting again on Monday, when in reality, there is absolutely nothing magical about Monday or nothing magical about January 1st. It's just something we've created in our head, right? It's not a helpful strategy. It's just not a good strategy. Don't fall victim to it, right? Just get back on track at the very next opportunity, right? Now that could be the next meal. Say you go out for lunch, it could be I'm straight back on track on, at dinner time, right? If it's an evening meal you're going out for, the next day, the next morning, you're straight back on track, right? And this applies whether you're talking about alcohol, whether you're talking about food, etc., right? We're still going to try get back on track as soon as possible at the next viable opportunity, right? So we're already making better choices where possible. We're already, trying to prep ourselves if we can and if it's appropriate, and then we're just getting straight back on track, right? And that really minimizes the damage that you do during these events, right? The damage to your overall, mentality around the diet, and also the damage to your actual progress, right? So don't have this, I'll start again on Monday mentality. Next opportunity, we're straight back on track, right? And for some people, they might feel a little bit, crap after a night out, especially if there's drinking involved. So generally what people will do, and they find great success with this, is they'll eat a little bit lower or a little bit fewer calories the next day, right? But we still try to hit our protein target, right? So that can, offset some of the calories that were consumed the night before, and especially if your appetite is a little bit lower because alcohol was consumed, or potentially foods that you were consuming, they made your stomach a little bit, sick, bloated, whatever. And that can be really helpful for some people. Again, it might not be helpful for other people because they might find themselves really, really hungry then, and then all of a sudden they start binge eating and, they've written off the weekend, right? So we have to, read the room. We have to make sure that the strategy is appropriate for you as an individual. And that's why we're going to use this time period, the end of the year, to actually learn this about ourselves, because then we can use that to inform our strategies going forward into the new year, right? Now, especially if alcohol is involved, what I always recommend my clients do is have a plan of action for food the next day. Because if you have no food prepared, if you have no plan of action, you're going to go for that greasy fry up or the fast food or whatever it is, right? And we don't want that. We ideally want to get back on track as soon as possible. So if we have a plan for food, ideally if we have food prepared, it's going to be much, much easier to get straight back on track. Now is not the time to be trying out that random new recipe that you saw on TikTok or whatever, where you're like, oh, it's, fish heads and fucking whatever else. Obviously don't try that. That's not going to be good. You're not going to enjoy the process. Use foods, use meals that are tried and true, that your body reacts well to, that you're going to be able to eat, right? And again, for a lot of people, when we're dealing with events, alcohol, food, combination of both, for a lot of people, we're just going to have to draw a line under that and just get straight back on track. Forget about it. It's in the past. Some of you are going to be able to learn from what happened. Some of you, it's going to be too raw at that time period, and you're going to just beat yourself up if you think about it too much, right? So for some of you, we're just going to draw a line under it, straight back on track, pretend it never happened, just think about the future, right? For other people, we're going to be able to, analyze that event. Oh, this went wrong, this went right, and then use that information going forward. Now, I can't tell, what's best for you. That's something that has to go through a little bit of trial and error, both with yourself and if you are getting coached with your coach. finding out the best approach for you. And again, that's obviously going to also be dependent on your goals, your situation, your diet history, etc. Right? So we want to come up with a plan of action to deal with the event, but we also want to ideally use that information to help us deal with events in future. Anyway, guys, that is the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If possible, like, subscribe, share this on your stories, etc. All of that stuff, it seems pretty cringe, but it actually really does help the channel grow, and we really appreciate it.